Hi everyone, it's Elizabeth here, and I wanted to share with you a quick video of my latest travel journal. I'm taking a trip next week and I've spent some time putting together my travel journal. As you know, that's the highest priority for me. The rest of the packing will come later. I wanted to show you what it looked like before I went on my trip so you could do a comparison of before and after and just kind of get a sense of what I do as prep work versus what happens, during the trip and afterwards to finish it up. If you take a look at the description, I'll put a link to the easy peasy YouTube video that I have, which kind of shows how, talks through about how I go about making these fabric journals, so you can have a better idea of that. It's fall up here in the New England area, so I wanted to stay with that fall theme, and I went ahead and used fabric that kind of reminded me of fall. I mean, isn't that just great? I love the colors on that. So that's the front of the journal. This is another piece of fabric that makes up the back of the journal. And this is the fabric that's on the inside front. And that's the piece of fabric that's on the back, which has got a full pocket over there. Again, take a look at the easy peasy journals to have an idea of how I put together a little piece of stiffener for the spine and things like that. Now, most of my journals tend to be 3 signatures. A signature is basically just a stack of papers folded in half, and that's what a signature is. And I bind them into my journal individually. I kind of like an easy binding process, so each signature is attached to the spine individually. They're not connected to each other in any way. And I use a very simple long stitch to attach them. Now, I basically punch 3 holes. There's one here, one kind of in the middle, and one there. Now, again, I don't measure, I just eyeball and see what looks good to me. But even though there are 3 punched holes, I treat it as though it's a 5-hole signature. And the way it works is this. Here's my hole number 1, which is the top of the spine. There's number 2, number 3 in the middle, number 4, and number 5 is the end of the spine. So if you actually use it as a 5 spine and just think of those edges as a hole, you get nice tight connections. So if you take a look, the signatures are connected really nice and tightly because of that particular spine connection. So here's kind of what it looks like, and before I do a page flip, walking you through what the pages look like, I wanted to talk about some things that are specific to this journal that you might have some questions about. So the first item I want to talk a little bit about is when I'm flipping through the journal, you will see pages that look like this. They're kind of clear pages. They're almost the full length of the book. By the way, this book is basically 9 inches by 6, so when it's a full spread is 9 by 12. I like that 9 by 12 folded in half kind of idea. Now, the way I create these pockets, it's actually really simple. All I do is take the 8.5 by 12 page protectors that most of us have lying around in the home from some office or school project. I trim off the holes, and then I stitch up the open sides with either fabric or paper. In this case, it's paper. And it's sealed on 3 sides, and the only side that's open is at the top to slip something in. It makes a nice good pocket. Stamps on anything that's plastic like this, I tend to use the Stays-On ink because it just does not come off. So that's one of the things you might see in here and be wondering, hey, what is that? The other thing is, if you have looked at my blog or one of the earlier YouTube videos, you will also see how I do these pre-printed pages. I tend to like having probably 3 sheets of watercolor paper in each signature. It's nice sturdy paper that lets me write or draw, and I like to actually have some of them already pre-painted. So these were actually done in large sheets of paper that I just basically spray painted. I watered down acrylic paints, used a little pump bottle from one of my leftover shampoo, conditioner, or something like that. Use some of the alphabet stencils and other stencils I have lying around and just sprayed it on. And then cut the pages down into that 9 by 12, and that gets folded in half for my signatures. Now, I like to use watered down acrylic inks, not watercolor, because if you add any other wet media to this, the acrylics are not going to run. They're fast at this point. If I had used watercolor paints on this, wouldn't be a problem as long as you just were aware of the fact that the watercolor is going to get lifted up again if you put any wet media on the paper. And finally, the last thing I wanted to show you was the idea of using ephemera. Now, these brown pieces of paper are just wrapping paper. that I happen to have lying around. You could also use paper bags if you happen to have those. And anytime I'm traveling, I kind of collect ephemera, right? Which is basically just things you pick up along the way. This happens to be, I think it was a trip, I can't remember now, but it was an Air France flight and they had one of these little menu things. And they're nice little, individual things you can add to your journals that remind you of trips that you've taken or are very specific to your way of living. And as opposed to stuff you buy in the store that somebody else decides would make cool ephemera, I kind of like the idea of personalizing the ephemera you have in the journal. The other thing you will notice that I like a lot of white or blank pages. I tend to draw and write in my journals a lot. So that's the other thing you'll see. So I will now go into just fast forward mode so you can see what the pages look like in the entire journal.